Hello, this is Professor Escurra. Once again, it's Friday, April the 3rd, or this video is intended for Friday, April the 3rd, for our course Spring Wildflowers is lecture 3 of week 1. We're going to continue on the subject of plant vegetative morphology. In our previous class, we discussed the structure of the basic plant module, whose technical name is the plant metamere, which is formed by a very simple arrangement of stems with nodes and internodes, followed by internodes. And at each node, there is a leaf, and there is also in the axial of the leaf, in the angle where the leaf enters a stem, where the petiole of the leaf enters a stem, there is in that little angle, there is a set of undifferentiated stem cells, or known as a meristem in botany, from where new branches can grow. We also showed that the complex arrangement of plants as different as a cabbage and a redwood are really due to, or a cactus, to give a few examples. Those incredibly different arrangements are really due to the existence of different internode lengths and different angles of branching. So plants with very short internodes can give structures like a rosette, which are basically whorls of leaves that grow at ground level. And plants with very elongated internodes can give vines or creepers, such as the ivy. The amount of wood in the stem will also make a difference in the plant is self-supporting or is growing against the ground. So I like comparing the plant module, the metamere, as or to a Lego. The Lego brick is incredibly simple, but you can arrange them in so many different ways to give really complex structures. Or a brick, the brick used by masons for the construction of buildings. With a brick, you can make a very simple shepherd's house, or you can make the Tower of Parliament in London. Things as different and as complicated as that, they all come from the simple arrangement of this small module that is the brick. Well, plants are really the formation or the complex arrangement of the formation of different metameres that are connected one to the other in different ways. Internode length is very important. The angle of branching is very important. And this phenomenon that we discussed that is known as apical dominance is quite important too, which is the ability of the plant to grow from the tip of the stem, what is known as the apical bud, or to produce lateral branches that will make a plant much more spreading and a growth much more profuse. So that's more or less a summary of what we saw in the previous class. What we're going to see now is and complicate the story a little bit more by discussing growth forms and habits in plants. So the first part of the class today will be about plant life cycle and growth form. Let us start with the plant's life cycle. Some plants are incredibly short-lived, while other plants are long-lived. Same story, really, as happens with different animal species. Some insects are incredibly ephemeral. They live for a very short period of time, while other animals can live for very long periods of time. In California, one of the traits our California ecosystems that really gave origin to the name of this course, Spring Wildflowers, is the amazing profusion of plants that flower during springtime. Mostly small herb-like plants that flower in our hills and slopes during the spring. Those plants that live for less than a year we call annuals. In California, we have a lot of annuals, like in some other parts of the world with similar climate, like for example, the central and northern part of Chile, basically because it rains in winter. And so there's a lot of moisture in the ground at a time in which temperatures are low and plants cannot grow very well. And the summer is very dry. The temperatures in summer are favorable for plant growth. Plants do like a warm temperature and a lot of sunlight to make photosynthesis, but there is no moisture. The summer is very, very dry. It doesn't rain in California in summer. So plants will have this intermediate season between summer and winter, the spring, in which there is moisture accumulated in the ground after the winter rains, and temperatures start getting nice and warm. And so a lot of plants will grow and produce seed at that time of the year. They normally germinate in late December or early January. They stay for most of January and a large part of February in the form of a ground level small rosette that you see greening the hills in California during winter. And then when spring comes, normally towards the end of February or sometimes early March, you start seeing flowers cropping up all over our hills. And in some years, we get these spectacular flower blooms that cover all the mountain slopes and hills in California. Plants that have that growth habit, that live for a very short time and then produce a lot of seed that falls to the ground and stays in the ground until the next wet season, are known as annual plants. This is important because most students confuse annuals with being longer than a year. Really, an annual plant is a plant that you can see that flowering seasonally only once a year, and then they will die off. So an annual plant has a lifespan of 1 year or less. Biennial plants have a lifespan of 2 years. The first year is with vegetative growth, and the second year they flower. A lot of cultivated plants that we eat from storage organs at ground level, like the carrot or the onion, are biennial. We have domesticated a lot of biennial plants. They spend the first year accumulating nutrients in a storage organ. In nature, they will use those nutrients to flower successfully very early, as soon as conditions are good on the second year. Many plants that we cultivate, we have domesticated them based on this trait, their ability to have storage organs from 1 year to the next. And then perennial plants are normally also known as woody plants. They live for more than 2 years. They normally have longer lifespans. Here we have some examples of annual plants. Annual plants are not necessarily always small. Perhaps I should have put a California plant here, the California poppy that we saw in the previous class. But many of the crops we cultivate, like corn or wheat or rice or beans, they're all annual plants. There are plants that we have domesticated in the wild. And the reason is because annual plants produce a lot of seed, because they spend the dry season or the cold season of the year, the unfavorable season of the year, in the form of seed, and they will sprout again during the next season. Biennial plants, a typical example is a common carrot. Also, the onions are biennial plants. Garlic is a biennial plant. The plants that have storage organs where they can store nutrients below ground, protected from predators, and then grow and flower profusely in the following season. And of course, perennial plants shown here in the California redwood, the largest living organism on Earth. are plants that live for more than 2 years. As a matter of fact, the redwood can live for many thousands of years. According to their growth form, not so much to the life cycle, but the way they grow, uh, plants can be herbaceous, shrubs, trees, vines, and lianas. Let me explain what each one of those is. A herbaceous plant does not produce wood. Many plants have the ability after the first growth to produce what is known as a secondary stem that is woody. They produce wood inside of the stem. They normally harden their conductive tissues inside the stem, filling it with cellulose and lignin, and that becomes the stem, apart from conducting nutrients to the leaves from the ground, also starts working as a support tissue. Uh, Herbaceous plants do not produce woody tissue. Their stems are normally also green in the outside, photosynthetic, and herbaceous plants normally die back after a growing season. Like, for example, again, the lupin we saw in last class, or the California poplar, many of the annual plants that populate our hills that live only for a few months, all those are herbaceous plants. A shrub is a woody perennial. They produce true wood. They live for more than 2 years. Um, but they normally have more than one stem. They branch. They're profusely ramified from the base, and they're normally not very tall. They're normally less than 20 feet tall, less than 5-6 meters tall. Trees, on the other hand, you can recognize the growth form of a tree very rapidly, because they're like shrubs, they're woody perennials, but they have a single main stem that we call the trunk. So trees have normally one stem, a trunk, and they can be quite high. They can be much higher than 20 feet tall. Vines are a special case of herbaceous plants in which they're not only non-woody, but their stems are very elongated and flexible, and they grow attached to other plants. They attach themselves to other plants. So they can actually reach the light in the top of the plant's canopy. Instead of investing in producing cellulose and lignin to grow themselves high, they just attach themselves to other plants and use them as support to grow high and find light. And of course, the last one, we don't have it in California, lianas. Lianas are woody perennials with elongate, flexible, non-self-supporting stems. You can see the definition is almost exactly equal to the vine. The main difference is that vines are herbaceous and lianas are woody. So vines are to herbaceous plants what lianas are to trees. Lianas are really climbing trees, trees that climb on top of other trees and avoid making large trunks or investing in large trunks. Um, we can also classify plants according to the appearance of the canopy, the way they grow. And we have a number of simple definitions. Cespitose is a plant that makes basically a turf, grows in tufts, mats, or clumps at ground level and can be trodden. Normally, cespitose plants are adapted to animal walking on top, so to animals walking on top of them, and to, in general, being trodden. Prostrate plants have stems lying flat upon the ground. Um, they're not necessarily cespitous. Remember, last class we saw the case of stolons, lying stems and the clover. That type of growth habit, plants that grow at ground level, normally with stolons, or with very, very low lying branches, are called prostrate plants. Spreading plants are plants that are oriented outwards, but they're not necessarily lying flat upon the ground. They're not supporting themselves on the ground. They occupy a lot of space to try and maximize photosynthesis from other plants and outshade other plants, outcompete them for light, but they're not finding support on the ground itself. And the opposite of prostrate is climbing. Plants that instead of lying flat upon the ground, ascend upon other plants, like vines or lianas are both climbing. And a special case of the climbing habit is plants that have twining stems or a twining habit, where the stems coil themselves like a snake around other plants as a means of support. Here I included some photographs. You have St. John's wort as a herb. You have both a white morning glory and a wild blackberry as a vine. You have a typical shrub, very common in our gardens, the Japanese quince, Sidonia japonica. And then, of course, you have the typical example of a tree with a single trunk. Here I've put some images of the different habitats: prostrate, decumbent, cespitous, erect growth, and the scapose growth, which I didn't put in the definitions, and perhaps you shouldn't concentrate too much in remembering it. It's just plants like the agave that have scapose plants have a rosette at ground level with a short shoot, and then once they reach the age of reproduction, they will produce a very elongated stem very rapidly. That type of reproduction is known as Big Bang reproduction, and reproduce and then die. So now the subject we're going to talk in the next part of this talk is the plant's leaves. The typical plant leaf, we symbolized it last week with the leaf of the common ivy or English ivy. You can see it here. The leaf basically has two parts. One is an elongated stem-like structure that is known as a petiole that supports a leaf. And then it has this green flat structure on top that is known as the blade or the lamina also. The leaf lamina or the leaf blade, in turn, has, we discussed this last week, has different optical properties above and below. The upper part of the leaf, as you can see, is shiny and very green. It has a transparent epidermis, and below the transparent epidermis, it has a set of cells that are known as the palisade tissue or palisade cells that are very, very rich in chloroplasts and photosynthetic organelles. So the upper part of the leaf is basically receiving sunlight and making photosynthesis. The lower part of the leaf is much duller in color. In many leaves, it's hairy. And if you look at it with a really good magnifying lens, you will see, we can't see it here, that it has little pores known as stomata from where the leaf exchanges gases. So when you see a leaf like that, it's actually doing two things. It is getting sunlight above, sort of harvesting the energy of the sun, and from below, it is exchanging gases. It is capturing, scrubbing CO2 out of the atmosphere, and with the energy of the sun, converting that CO2 into organic molecules, normally into simple sugars that are then transformed in the plant metabolism into a number of different things. Because it is working during the day in the process of photosynthesis, it needs a good supply of water and nutrients that come from the soil. And you can see it here. All leaves have veins, have ramified, a very branched system of irrigation that allows the leaf to receive nutrients from the soil through the petiole and then below that from the stem, and maintain feeding the process of photosynthesis as the plant continues to harvest light. So now we're going to go to a formal diagram of a leaf to sort of systematize what I have just showed you. The leaf has normally a stem-like structure that connects it to the stem. This is formed by vascular tissue, a tissue that conducts nutrients and water, and is known as a petiole. When the petiole enters the blade, inside the blade, the continuation of the petiole is known as a primary vein. And then, of course, the primary vein will branch and ramify in the same way that the tree is branching and ramifying to form, I'll say it again, I got it wrong. The continuation of the petiole is known as a midvein. The midvein is ramified into primary veins that are then ramified themselves into secondary or tertiary veins until they irrigate the whole blade. The tip of the leaf is known as the apex. In some plants, the apex is a very important distinctive taxonomic character. And the leaves might have, many do, many don't, two little leaf-like structures that we call bracts. In general, all structures that are not true leaves but are flat and look a little bit like a leaf we call bracts, B-R-A-C-T, and it has two little bracts at the base of the petiole, sometimes known as stipules. Now, the leaf arrangement can be of different types. First of all, leaves can be alternate. Let me go to the illustration to show you. Leaves can be alternate when there's only one leaf at each node. So when there's one leaf at each node, the leaves alternate. They normally appear in different sides of the stem, around the stem like that, and we call the leaves alternate. Leaves are opposite when we have two leaves at each node, and leaves are whorled when we have more than two leaves at each node. Let me show you again the definitions. So these are the basic types of formation of leaves. Let me show you some examples on the screen. This is a branch from an orange tree, and you can see the arrangement of the leaves. It's got one leaf here, another leaf there, a third leaf there. The arrangement of the orange, of the leaves in the orange tree is alternate. You can also see with a little bit of imagination on this poor screen, the formation of, the existence of an axillary bud. So we can tell that this is a leaf and it has the axil and the axillary bud. This is, on the other hand, a plant from South Africa. It's basically a creeping bignonia from South Africa. And you can see that the leaves are opposite. They appear in each node, the leaves appear in pairs, opposite to each other. Here you have one leaf, here you have another leaf. Let's go down. Here you have the next node, one leaf, another leaf. Here we go up, the next node, one leaf, another leaf. So the South African bignonia has opposite leaves. The leaves are opposite. With respect to where the leaves are, there are basically two types of leaves. One is known as basal leaves, which is when leaves occur in whorls at the base of a plant. And the other one is cowling leaves, when leaves occur along stems away from the base. This is similar to the subject we discussed last week of long shoots and short shoots. Let me show you here. Well, here you have alternate leaves, opposite leaves, whorled leaves in a lily. Here we have basal leaves that form a rosette, and cowling leaves that grow all along an elongated stem. Perhaps the most important part of this whole leaf discussion, and I end the class with this, is the type of blade. Leaves can have simple blades. Let me go to illustrations. Leaves can have simple entire blades when the whole leaf has a single blade, like the case of the orange tree we were discussing a little while ago. Sometimes the leaves are indented, they are lobed. Typically, for example, the oak leaves can be strongly lobed, and that helps the leaf reduce the surface under certain conditions. Leaves can be parted when the lobing is so strong that it reaches the midvein. And then if lobing has become so strong that the midvein becomes bare, then we call the leaf pinnate. And this is very, very important because pinnate leaves might give the impression that this is a stem followed by leaves. But as I will demonstrate, allow me to go back to the screen where I can make a demonstration. As I was showing you a little while ago, the orange tree or the ivy have simple leaves that we also call entire leaves. The leaf blade, the lamina, is one single surface with all the things that we talked a little while ago, the green area on top, the shiny surface with transparent epidermis, and the more duller area below where gas exchange is done. Now, if you look at some plants like the fig, for example, this is a common fig that gives, I have it in the house and it gives me very nice figs in the middle of summer. You see the leaf, it can resemble a little bit that of the ivy, but it's more indented. It has these deep indentations. So this leaf is lobed. It has 3 lobes. One, let me show it like that, it has 1 lobe, a second lobe here, and a third lobe above. They also call them trilobate. 3 lobes form the leaf. Now, in some figs, this is, as a matter of fact, a sibling fig in the garden, but it's in an area where it's much drier in my garden, and the fig doesn't seem to be enjoying it altogether. You can see that the lobes become way deeper. And so this plant is deeply lobed, and that helps the plant. If you compare it with the other one, let me show you the two. It helps the plant to reduce, it helps the plant to reduce the surface of the leaf under dry conditions without actually losing any leaves. So you have a gradual transition from entire leaves to lobed leaves, and then in some cases, let me go again to this South African bignonia. What you will see is that the leaf itself looks like a stem with leaf. Let me remove it for you to show. The leaf itself looks like a stem with little leaves. And this is known as a compound leaf. Now, why do we know that this is a leaf and not a stem with leaves? Why aren't these themselves called leaves? We call them leaflets, but they're actually not leaves. Why do we know that, or how do we know that? Well, because if you look at the axil of the leaf, it will have a node, and it will have in the axil an axillary bud. While these leaflets do not have axillary buds in the axil. So we can tell that this is an entire leaf, and these are really the result of the deep clefting of the entire leaf. Some other examples of parted leaves, or compound leaves as we call them, compound leaves, you can see here in the vinegar plant, oxalis. that has 3 leaflets. It's known as three-foliate leaf. Like clover also is three-foliate. Many plants have compound leaves with only 3 folioles, and you can see them there. I hope you can see them. And we call these three-foliate. So let me try and make a summary of all this to end the class for today. Here we have, summarizing the whole story I was telling you, the succession of leaf shape and form. The typical, perhaps the ancestral original leaf of most flowering plants is an entire leaf. It has only one single lamina, one single blade with different forms, but it's entire. In some plants, leaf reduction is done or is obtained by lobing. The edge of a leaf becomes indented. It shows indentations that reduce the leaf surface. If lobing is all the way to the midvein, or almost to the midvein, then the leaf is parted. If leaf lobing is so strong, or has been so strong in evolutionary times, that the leaf itself looks like a stem with little leaves, then the leaf is pinnate. And each of these leaf resembling structures are known as leaflets or folioles. In some plants, as in the jacaranda, and I didn't bring a jacaranda today, I have one here outside the house, I'll perhaps do it next class. The leaflets themselves have become, in turn, into second-order folioles. And these leaves that are very, very strongly parted into, this is a foliole, this one here, and each one of these is a second-order foliole or foliole, or small leaflet. These leaves are called bipinnate. They're pinnate twice. The leaflets themselves are again pinnate. Leaves that have leaflets coming from a central point are known as palmate because they resemble the palms of our hands. And palmate leaves or compound leaves that have only 3 folioles are known as three-foliolate. So that's all for today. Thank you very much. And next week, we're going to be discussing the shape of leaves and some other final traits of leaves in order to move into the reproductive structure of plants. Have a nice weekend. Thank you. Thank you very, very much.